Welcome everyone to the November 15th Tech Alley. If you're new to this channel, please like and subscribe so that you not only will support us here at the Las Vegas UX Meetup, but you'll also be supporting the overall Tech Alley community, which is a rapidly growing Las Vegas community and a bunch of business owners, interested minds. It's probably one of the faster growing tech groups in the nation. So please, if you like what you're watching here, yes, please like, share, subscribe, and you'll also see other topics that we touch on here in the community. So with that said, don't want to injure myself. Yes, as I mentioned, we are part of the Las Vegas UX Meetup. If you're watching this on your screen, you could scan that. You're not here, but hey, if you're watching this, check in anyway, because it's great to build numbers in the community. This is the team. Not everyone is here. Olga, Suraj, Abigail, myself, Gerardo here. We have built this great group of people over the last several years. This has been around since, maybe 2018, 2019. I was one of the early coordinators for the group, and since then, there have been other leaders and others that have contributed their voice to the UX group and tech community overall. I am your speaker for today. The last time I've done a talk here at the UX Meetup was probably right before COVID hit. There is a YouTube video somewhere out there. It might be on my vlog. If you can find me, reach out to me later about it. It is about a very similar topic. We're still talking about systems thinking as it impacts user experience. For this, there is levels of maturity that I've learned since doing that talk. I am a user experience architect. When I last did this talk, I was just a mere UX designer, but I've always been interested in being a UX architect, predominantly because there was something very nuanced about being an architect versus being a designer. I've since then worked with startups, worked with agencies. I've built an agency at one point in Los Angeles, worked in San Francisco, worked with Fitbit. Coming to Vegas, I've worked with William Hill, which is a sports book company, then later Caesars Entertainment, and now more recently, I've worked with Optum and United Healthcare. So, you're here today for this conversation, this talk about seeing the invisible engine or the hidden engine. This is something that I feel not enough companies talk about, whether you're a Fortune 500, there's a number of startups that don't really consider this, even a lot of business owners. Since that last talk I had several years ago, there was an ask for my points to be more catered to business owners, and so I'm going to point those out as we go through today. As I mentioned, when output becomes input, most teams will build these systems on accident, and if you have an architect in your group, whether it's a solutions architect, which is more on the developer side, or UX architect, more on the behavioral studies and execution side, if you don't have any of these, a lot of people will fumble their way into building the company. And I will hopefully give you the insight and the tools where you may not have to fumble at all, and you will build something intentionally. So, what you have here is a basic feedback loop, which is typical within the realm of systems thinking. A lot of systems thinking practitioners will have this as a tool, not as the main aspect of their work. Every action creates a reaction, and that part of the change will systemically butterfly effect its way through the entire cycle until it goes back to the start. I'm going to give you examples about loops that either amplify or dampen over time. Time is a very critical foundation to systems thinking. So it's something that will happen naturally, but we have to always perceive things as not static. Things are changing over time, and we have to anticipate with intention how to herd or manage those loops. So there are two types of feedback loops that happen within systems thinking, or just in the world in general. There are reinforcing loops, and there are balancing loops. Please pay attention to some of the color coding I've given the arrows. We will see them reoccur down the line, and those color codes will reference what type of loops we're looking at. So even though this is the foundation where you have constantly reinforcing, constantly building, balancing loops will counter the increase. It doesn't have to necessarily be a decrease in response. It could merely be maintaining an oscillating harmony, going up, down, but never all the way up. From here, we have two types. This is what a lot of people like to hear, what it's easier to understand about systems thinking when it comes to feedback loops. You have a virtuous cycle and you have a vicious cycle. Using Netflix as an example, we have the recommendation loop, where whenever you are getting a recommendation from Netflix, you are just, as people engage that loop, you're getting better and better recommendations over time. So that is a virtuous cycle because it's constantly growing and becoming positive. Vicious cycle, which is a problem a lot of companies' products have, is when you're doing user research, maybe mid to like late stage in your attempts at salvaging a situation, and if users leave, what feedback are you going to get? User surveys only cater to those who are still on board. And a lot of companies don't realize that the people who have found a reason to stay on their product or platform may have a specific narrative in mind, but it's not the total truth of why people left in the first place. So you can imagine, yes, you can have better recommendations, but if no one is there, you're really only getting the feedback of those who bother to remain, and that may not help you. A great way to figure out where you're at from this systemic situation that you may be in is asking yourself, well, what do they do? What is a user doing on your product or platform? What business metric is this scenario feeding? And does it change the user experience? This is something that not only do I ask myself in every product meeting, any systems meeting, whether it's United Healthcare, whether it's Caesar Entertainment, or even a startup, I even ask this on my personal life. Yes, I do apply systems thinking to my own personal relationships, and it's helped a lot because, especially on a personal level, there are things I need to make hard decisions on, and I need to make them sooner rather than later. Similarly, from an architect standpoint, when it comes to business, these are questions on a very basic level we need to ask ourselves, especially whether you're a stakeholder or you've just bothered to care, because when you speak up and you have suggestions, you don't realize how much of a game changer you've become. Go for it.
Can you give us examples of how you use the framework, maybe in a business scenario and then in a personal life scenario, how to apply that framework of asking those questions?
Sure. So let's go back to talking about these, right? So let's go to William Hill. So when I was working Sportsbook, we were trying to determine why users were not engaging in certain bonuses. I went out to the actual casinos themselves, like Silver 7 and amongst other places. I did on-foot interviews to a lot of the tellers, the personnel. And despite a lot of the happy demeanor of all the personnel, there was something missing about what users were doing. And it's one, they didn't know certain bonuses existed. The ones that did are probably within the niche of people that are already doing it. And when they were trying to just keep marketing their marketing approach, it only really fed the people who are already a part of in the know. They're VIPs, right? They're personal concierge. They're calling people, but they were not getting any new customers, which really affected the very small town feel that William Hill was having. And from a larger business perspective, it was whether they were able to retain their identity or would they have to make business decisions that would have to gain support from a larger group, because before, when I worked at William Hill, this was before Caesars acquired them. This was before El Dorado even considered, acquiring William Hill. And I tried pitching to the stakeholders, well, what do we do about this missing demographic? So they were thinking about how much the cost to acquire a customer. And that may not be an easy decision to make, especially if they're so used to that small town Vegas community, right? How do you spend more on that marketing? This challenge to their interest on improving the scale in which they wanted to acquire customers made me convinced that I needed my own space to get away from the hustle bustle of everyday UX and see if I could create a better solution. Some of the things that a peer UX designer we brought on board decided was, what if we revamped the sports book experience itself, right? Ironically, if you ever go to some of the old Vegas casinos, you'll see that DraftKings already has these kiosks, these personal sportsbook kiosks that are smaller than their typical Caesars Entertainment one. We had that idea like a few years prior to DraftKings doing it, so it was really a waste of time. But that's how I applied this in that scenario, is where is the opportunity? What can I create? Because when you're working within a product space, you're only looking at the limitations that the stakeholders give you. But if you're looking at it from a business perspective, it's just a matter of how much funding can I throw at this. And so that's how I applied that. Anything else? No? Good? Okay. So we're going to look at 4 loop archetypes. I'm going to share some examples of how this works, how this applies, but this isn't the only 4 loops. There's a large number of possibilities for relationships between things and the consequences that are created from it. First one, LinkedIn. Everyone here is a part of LinkedIn one way or another, so we're all familiar with this loop. More users, more value per user, more content, more invites and shares. Each time you have a new connection, that makes your profile more valuable. The more followers you get, like if you're a LinkedIn influencer like our friend John, every time he reaches out to make new connections on the platform, it only enhances his reach, and by doing that, it only enhances his value to the entire system. So, from a business perspective, this is a growth engine. This is exponential growth versus linear acquisition cost. We'll touch on this again later, because linear acquisition cost is like, I'm going to pay for a customer acquisition and I'm going to get equal value, and then you repeat this process almost like you're going a door-to-door salesman. But this effect, unique not just to LinkedIn but a lot of social media platforms, is a great example on a very grounded basis, because when you're on social media, you have no idea this is happening. But this is how a lot of this works on social media, whether it's TikTok or Instagram. And from a UX perspective, every sharing feature is the architecture for this loop. So yeah, that's on a basic level the growth engine archetype. Oh, the thing about this archetype too is this really only works if people buy into your value proposition. If people don't see an inherent value in it, this isn't going to work. So you can't just assume that likes, shares, and subscriptions are enough. You have to provide value to people. I'm trying to remember, there was one thing that goes with this. So this also matters if you have a good first impression. So if your MVP is solid, if you have a very good MVP, if you've curated your initial features to be launched, if people like that, this will also work. Now, of course, caveat outside of this lecture's topic, your MVP may leave a very specific impression that may not be your intention. So be very careful of where this growth can diverge from compared to your original architecture. Second one's Quality Engine by Spotify. I use Spotify all the time. Even though they don't make a lot of money initially, they are really good at showing me how this is possible. This is the curation engine. So based on user behavior, it creates a better curation of the song selections you have. Oh, you're good. And then from the better curation, you are more attracted, more engaged, and then the feedback you get from the richer data, then you start to realize, okay, let me better curate this. I admit I am not the best at understanding how music works as it impacts people. It's one of my great mysteries, which is why I'm very attracted to music curation, music development, all that stuff, only because just as there are a number of musicians who are very mystified by how design works from a visual standpoint, I'm similarly that way with music. And so when I saw this and I understood this, I was like, wow, how does it anticipate the taste of a song selection outside of data alone? So you can imagine how unique this can be if you do it right, especially with the realm of AI. AI can understand things from a certain number of meta tags, but doesn't mean it guarantees that it understands you as a person. But with enough data, it eventually can. So from a UX impact standpoint, you may not be designing the interface. You may actually just be designing how the algorithm works. So that removes a lot of UX designers away from the visual design space and more into the algorithmic mechanical engine. And it's very similar to how sound, like audio design works, right? Audio interface, which is that was a very hot topic for a little bit, but it kind of just disappeared for a while. I don't know if it's ever going to come back, but UX for audio is a very interesting space.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, because I had, at the beginning of Spotify, I kept Pandora forever.
Yeah.
The algorithms that are Spotify's algorithm still kind of sucks.
That's right. That's right. Pandora was the everyone loved it for a very long time until eventually Spotify learned how to better curate, right? And all that takes is just a huge chunk of data. What I'm curious about, and I don't know what the metrics is on this, is how much data do you need from a bunch of people who love a particular genre or artist? At what point does that threshold get met that now it can anticipate everyone else that has similar taste, right? But that's why this requires, from a reinforcing loop, understanding with data how people behave. Right, exactly what we're talking about. What data are you capturing? What are you doing with it? Friction tax. So this is something that so many companies, whether you're Fortune 500 or otherwise, run into. You see this a lot in e-commerce systems. I've done enough e-commerce systems to know that I wanted to actually improve upon the cart experience. Even Shopify has parts of it that I'd want to improve, even though they're really good at what they do right now. Because once people don't understand how they're getting through the checkout, you're going to have cart abandonment even if they love the product. This has caused a lot of deaths in companies, and this is something that I hope to fight against, or that others will fight against. Because even if it does demand a lot of tech debt to fix the e-commerce system, it's worth it, because quick fixes, whether you're adding a text, whether you're adding tooltips, whether even emailing after the fact, it's like, oh, you didn't finish your cart, you should come back and do it. If there is something within your checkout system that isn't working for a user, it's not going to, like, the additional effort is not going to do anything, or at least it won't do enough to save your company. But if you manage to catch the mechanism of why your company or your checkout is failing, that is the game changer. It could be something so small. Like the popular anecdote that we all learn as UX designers is the buy button, right? That $1 million button. And that was such a small thing, but that alone can change the course of your company. This is something I run into every so often, especially on the enterprise level. Actually, this is a problem I'm running into right now at United Healthcare. The support trap. So this is when a company has a lot of these complaints and tickets coming into your setup, and Now you're going to try to figure out how to address it, whether you call them back from a customer service perspective, or if there's a bug in the system, now you have tickets that have to go to the developers to fix. That takes time, that takes resources, but it really depends on how you choose to fix it. So quick fixes don't work in this sense, but a lot of the excuses companies make, especially product teams, they'll say, oh, what if we just do a tooltip here? What if we do a modal or a help text? Those are okay, but they're not great because they create they sustain the problem this system has. And that just could be a miscommunication. This could be just an arrangement of buttons, because at some point when a lot of customers or a lot of users use the same system, they're going to lock in a type of behavior that keeps them doing the same thing. So you're going to run into a lot of the same problems. And until that's fixed, you're going to perpetuate it. And then someone will say, well, what if it's not broke, don't fix it. It's broken. You just don't realize it's broken. But that's why you need to, if you're going to audit the company, instead of firing people, really look at what is actually causing this increase in support cost. How do we improve things for everybody? And that's why the support trap is it's a big archetype, especially in businesses. Yeah. So loading things with info buttons and stuff, not a great idea. You're better exposing all extra details as much as possible, or redesigning the entire thing, because I can assure you when you fix the entire setup, it saves costing down the line. So just a recap of everything. You have the growth engine. Are users bringing other users? Quality spiral. Is your product learning and improving? Friction tax. Are small problems compounding? And support trap. Are you documenting around bad design? And as I mentioned in the beginning of this section, these aren't the only loops that exist. These are just some of the ones that kind of stand out from products that we've used or experienced as business owners or operating products. Questions so far? Ricardo.
Which loop, or probably not here, none of them, could you apply or recommend to apply for a casino app? No sports loop, a casino app.
In terms of like a solutioning?
Which, based on your experience or your knowledge, could fit better to maintain customers that build loyalty, for example?
Oh, like okay, so how would you design a better product app for a casino?
Yeah.
Right. Actually, I can get into that next. Strategic intervention by 3, because I'm only suggesting 3 types of interventions, because you're asking for how do you improve it. We're going to get into that. So where and how to shift loops for maximum leverage. There are 3. It's basic. Stopping damage, amplifying success, which is what you're asking about, and then measurement. Measurement is a strategy because not enough people measure. It's weird. Like in United Healthcare, for United Health Network, we are not building a dashboard to track metrics and behavior. Until they launch this thing that I'm currently working on, I have not made suggestions on putting in the sensors to track certain metrics because their goal was just to push things across the finish line. But I would suggest doing measurement. So going through these 3 strategies. Breaking the vicious cycle. As you know earlier when I mentioned that the pink, magenta arrows are the vicious cycle, we have to look at what makes it worse, identifying what accelerates the damage, and knowing how to intervene on it. You good? So typically what a lot of people do is that they do quick wins, they do better error messaging. That can work, but it's temporary. If you're pressed against time and you're pressed against budget, that's fine. It's not great. When you're doing a systemic fix, it should be something where you can endorse self-service, where you're able to troubleshoot, and when you're getting all the data in from how people are going through the system, how does it prioritize the data, the feedback that you're getting, so that way you know what to improve. You can have AI, potentially AI, to help you figure out what those priorities are based on your entire system's makeup. Or you can just manually look at it and be like, okay, our budget can do this fix first because this will give me the benefit that will offset this cost of another area. But what's great about doing a systemic fix over just a quick win alone is that your costs will go down over time, if not immediately. For a UXer, we're looking at not just user trust. On a larger scale for a UXer, we're looking at the restoration of brand trust. So that's very pivotal to us on a behavioral level. And then for developers, when you have less interruption, you'll get better data so that way you'll know how to prioritize what to fix and what to do next from a feature perspective. And this is especially true for error messages, right? That's why I mentioned up here error messaging, because when you get a system error, support ticket, developers who are working on a new feature or something that they have left on their tech debt list, that's going to interrupt their work. So now you have to push out certain things and you have to look at the cost benefit of fixing something versus building something new. And back to the system error again. Amplify virtuous cycle, which is what you're referring to, Gerardo. How do you improve on what's already working? So this is something that a lot of business owners, entrepreneurs, and just us generally as practitioners of user experience care about. What do we gain from improving something that's already working? Well, anyone that sees forward to the future will know that this is inherently something we all aim for. Here's a comparison of two different loops, referrals. Basic loop is friend joins, end of story, and back to liking the product. You're only going to get singular linear growth doing this. When you add an accelerator, this is where the concierge stuff happens, right? This is why William Hill spent so much money on concierge systems, or just doing a white glove, talking to people and just gaining value that way. But if you can automate it, even better. So after referring a friend, that friend gets special treatment for joining, right, the product. And then that person will have to, let's say, either invite a few more friends or they'll just naturally do that from the value of the product. And by doing that, the original person who invited that or referred that new friend will get bonuses and benefits from that. So that's some ideas on how to do it. It may be simple, it may be par for the course for a lot of us who work in casino industry, but it works. And so looking at these loops, depending on how you design it, it can compound the value differently from each other. For UX, when you're looking at design that multiplies, you're no longer trying to fulfill a criteria. Now you're trying to go beyond the criteria. Now we're trying to be more creative. Like, what else can I do beyond the bare minimum that can create this scenario? And so that's when, like, you can't really work yourself as to just fulfilling your job role. That now you have to think beyond that. You have to think more as an architect, not just as a designer. And then additionally for developers, how do I make sure it gets better with scale? Now this is similar between UX and developers. We have to both think in the same way. It's not just about making things with more infrastructure to handle more people. It's how do I exponentially grow this? Whether or not the business can handle it is really depending on the monetary strategy. But that's not our conversation today. And this goes into measurement. What I was mentioning earlier about building sensors. Don't underestimate dashboards. Dashboards are the center for all information that you'll ever need to make your next move. Whether it's revenue from business, engagement from UX, or performance from developers. When you're looking at systems that are in constant dynamic movement and not static, you're looking at velocity, not just endpoints. One of the critical things about systemic design, if not systems thinking, is looking at velocity. And so when you're building sensors for your product, you have to look at speed. That's why you sometimes will have time to task as one metric. And that is important for the larger vision of things. These are just some ideas. This is not a comprehensive number of categories for a dashboard, but hopefully it gets you thinking about what to do next. And so when you look at the measurement of things, ROI is one, of UX in particular. So if there's ever a question of whether UX gets supported within an initiative or company, measurement, sensors, is critical to justifying cost of the UX department. UX, feature feedback, and optimizing the loop velocity, which is actually pretty fun when you see how long it takes for people to do things, and to see what efficiencies have been created or still need to be created. So as we get towards the end of this talk, going into what differs between a designer and an architect, it really is, did I just wander into the system, or am I intentionally creating this system to yield very specific results? It is intentional. Is the growth what I'm looking for? What are my highest leverage points to create the solution that I'm looking for? And as you see at the bottom, we're looking at UX investment. We're looking at a UXer not just looking at design and research alone, but looking at it from a very, I'm the strategist of this product. Let me figure out how to get it to do what I want it to do. And for developers to really look at not just building a stable system, but a system that can scale. So to wrap up this entire talk, I just want to reaffirm that even though systems thinking may look really overwhelming and complex, it isn't. It's really just intentional. So when you get into the practice of analyzing everything in your life or in your work, and you look at all the different pieces and how they connect together, you could end up with a massive, massive map of things. One of the key things about a systems thinker who is mapping a loop diagram or just diagrams of relationships in general is that you have to be intentional about what you're trying to map. You can't map everything. And so if you're looking for a very specific goal, you're only going to look for so many things that have a direct and immediate impact towards your goal. And that's as far as you need to map. Sure, you can map secondary and tertiary influences, but then you got to look into how much over time is that going to impact you. So that's a whole nother talk for a whole different time. But as long as you have a goal, loop diagrams and systems thinking can work in your favor. So if I've made you curious or I've made you more informed, I have fulfilled my calling for today. Thank you for coming. If you need to reach out to me, here is my LinkedIn. And for those in YouTube land, thank you for watching. There are many other videos for Tech Alley here in Vegas that are amazing and profound. So please support this channel by liking and subscribing. And we have time, so let's do this thing. Any other questions before we dive into this? Nope, you're good. So,
I think there were questions.
yeah, any questions? Go.
You used the term sensor in the product. What do you mean by that?
Like flags, basically, like if I'm implementing like let's say I program a flag within, let's say, sign up, right? Now it's going to track how many signups. Are they signing up through like LinkedIn? Are they signing up for YouTube? Or you sign up through using a Facebook SSO? When you look at anything as small or as big and you justify the narrative as to why you're trying to detect these numbers, we need more of that. I think a lot of products don't have those sensors. They don't have those flags that tell you, oh, this is how many people are coming here. Here's a threshold of what we need to hit. It's almost like creating KPIs from performance and behaviors of things.
What metrics?
Exactly. Because that way you build the dashboard. You build the dashboard, and the dashboard gives you all of that information together. One of the more powerful tools that I've come across in the last several years was Storybook. I don't know how many people have run into that, but Storybook is a very powerful custom tool that is designed to implement sensors, pull that into a custom dashboard, and give you the metrics that will help you do what you want with that engine. I remember running into it I don't think I was at Fitbit. I was at Caesars. And then it was brought up again when I was over at Optum, doing e-commerce for their Optum store. It is expensive, but the notion of just putting these flags and sensors within the intention from a UX perspective is very different from a business/product/dev perspective. So we need to be aware as UX designers that we can assert strategies that would help us in the long term by putting these things that dev will have to, put into it. Because if we partner with developers, it's not so much just about speaking of the language to develop a feature, it's also about building future potential that we can control as UX designers, especially if the future development or the maturity of a UX department as a whole is journey management. Because Nielsen and Norman mentioned that this is where we need to reach for full maturity as an organization, is journey management. And I don't know how many companies do that. Over at United Healthcare, we get pretty close, but it's a matter of being intentional about setting up the infrastructure to pull people together for that approach, where you can manage the entire journey of a user from start to finish. But it's very hard because typically, I think we talked about this earlier, a lot of people make quick fixes to their product, and it doesn't, for cost effectiveness, you keep building these quick fixes until you have to consolidate everything, which at the end of the day costs way too much money if you look at it in retrospect. But yeah, that's what I meant by flags and sensors. For those that have just arrived, so this is the maturity of taking all of those, looking at things from a systems thinking perspective. I did this for an MIT course. Voluntarily, they didn't ask me to do this, but I wanted to take what I've experienced when I just came off of Caesars Entertainment and really showcase what the ideal is, because a lot of my peers in that course were not UX designers and did not work in product. They were working in like construction in like Norway or something. So a lot of people from all over the world, non-tech industry, but because I worked in the tech industry, I wanted to expose what was the ideal design cycle, which everyone's familiar with, product UX lifecycle, which is what you see in the middle here. I don't know if you'll be able to see it from YouTube, but just know that I have it. Reach out to me if you're curious. And then ultimately what Caesars Sportsbook or Caesars Entertainment was doing that was differing from the ideal. Just from looking at this, any questions? Any thoughts? I don't know how clear anyone can see it from the back. Feel free to come up if you need to. But for those who are new to product, this center area is you have product management, you have design, you have QA, and then you have the stakeholders and market. And you could visually see that there's a difference between this and this because one, it's missing a feedback loop here, and you have something else going on top, and you have another diverging pathway over here. The dam, or at least the interference in this entire flow, is the lack of requirements adjustments. And this ongoing flow that is sitting outside of the cycle is us timing our product releases to sports events. So you can imagine you're choking the entire product and UX process because you're not giving it room to breathe and you're not adjusting to new knowledge, new data, new insights. So eventually, even though Caesars was trying to throw money at marketing, eventually I knew that even though it took a few years, because if you throw enough money, you think it's going to work because it looks cool, eventually it's not going to work for your product, and eventually your product will choke out and die on the vine. And that's why, if anything, you're still seeing DraftKings still reign as one of the top sports apps in the industry, because they're tech industry first. And so they approach things from a more tech maturity perspective. And Caesars Sportsbook was not going to last the same way, despite them throwing money at it. Go ahead.
What do you
So first, so this assumes that you've understood your product groups, because like every company has their own version of this culture, right? So you first need to map how that loop works. Talking to stakeholders, talking to product managers, everybody, right? Seeing where the baton is passing. Once you've mapped that out, then you know where to integrate it. So the timing is purely based on, did you introduce this map that you've created to stakeholders, or at least the people who are in charge of certain sections, and what they think about it, and then see how you can make that adjustment. And typically you get all the leads together to talk about it. So when I tried to fix what we were experiencing in the United Health Network section, I showed them this. I told them the story of what I ended up doing to create this. I told them about Caesars. And then I gave them a comparison of what I was seeing in our product group now. And after that discussion, that caused everyone to put some confidence behind their concerns with what wasn't working, how people were getting burnt out. And the timing of me introducing this was incredibly important, because there were people quitting from the team because of the amount of pressure they were getting. They were getting pressure on the UAT side, and that was a trickle over from the lack of cohesion and efficiency even earlier in that format. So when it comes to timing when to introduce these improvements, it's purely showing them that you've done the homework of charting the cycle first, and then showing them what is happening, what's wrong, and then suggest improvements.
I think it's super valuable to have diagrams where you can show them, hey, this is what's happening right now.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because we're visual, right? No matter, like, as dry as my slides were, is that the ideal way for me to introduce these concepts? No. But if you show them something that is relatable enough, people will eat that up, right? If I could do business meetings purely in like stick figure diagrams, people will eat that up, you know? Like with crayons, everyone will eat that up. That's why, what is that early prototyping tool that we all used in the beginning? The one that was like kind of sketchy.
Starts with an
Yeah, I forgot what it is, but like people love that, you know, more than the refined stuff. So yeah, creating any type of visual is still more impactful than just a bunch of text alone, which is why I even mentored some of my executives. I told them, a lot of what you're showing on these slides is important, but if you have too much information on a screen, we're not going to remember it. Like, we're there present to the meeting, but we're not present in the comprehension of it. And so that's why it's always a goal to make things as simple as possible, and if you can't, do a visual.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
In the middle circle, you have discussed product feasibility. How could you discuss that if you don't have the product design yet, knowing that your design flow is in the middle,
Where are we at right now?
in the center?
This one?
Yeah.
This one right here?
Yeah.
So whenever you have a very chicken and the egg scenario like this, you just got to start somewhere. There has to be something that catalyzes. So with every systems thinking loop, there's always a catalyst. So when you're trying to catalyze a system, it's not going to look like this initially, especially when you're in the mode of discovery. But if you're designing intentionally, you could oftentimes declare what is the catalyst, and then that starts the entire chain reaction. So let's say you don't have the design yet, so you're just building it. Eventually, from the first pass, this is not going to have anything. But eventually, when it comes back to you again, that will create the adjust design loop. So
You can start anywhere. Yeah.
exactly, you could start from anywhere.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions, thoughts? Good. All right.